Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Milley, has strong words for his old boss. In a new book by journalist Bob Woodward, Milley's quoted as saying, Trump is, quote, the most dangerous person in the country and a fascist. To give a perspective on Milley and these comments is senior fellow and military expert at Defense Priorities, Daniel Davis. Daniel, thanks for joining us. The comments Mark Milley reportedly made are blunt. What's your take on them?
Well, I think that this really reflects just the personal animosity of General Milley towards Trump. I mean, he didn't hide it hardly at all when he was actually in uniform. The two went after it a lot during the time he was there. So, you really have to kind of take that into consideration when you're talking about what he means here, because certainly any of the opponents of Trump right now are going to seize on this and say, here was this fine, upstanding general, and and he says what he says here we have to take seriously, and Trump really is a danger. But then you actually look at what does he mean by the danger? What does he think he's going to do? Because there still are constraints on the White House. It doesn't matter if you say, I want to be a dictator. Even if you say it out loud, there are, limits and balance of power, et cetera, within the U.S. government that you actually can't do that. And I think you really get down to it is that Milley didn't like Trump's foreign policy, and now that as a citizen, he's free to give his voice, and I think that's what you're seeing.
What are the significance of these comments, do you think, and are Mark Milley's reported concerns about potentially being court-martialed if Trump wins the election justified?
I don't think they are. I mean, certainly the president has the power to recall someone to active duty, which is specifically what he was referring to there. But there's a separate issue of actually bringing somebody up. You actually have to have charges because there's independent court-martial authority within the U.S. military that itself has to have some grounds for it. You can't just, I don't like him, so court-martial him. It doesn't work that way. Even if Trump wanted it to work that way, it doesn't. So if there is no laws that have been violated, then there's no substance, ergo there won't be any kind of trial.
Do you worry that the Supreme Court's recent ruling granting the president immunity to do what they like if their actions are within their presidential powers could give Trump more power to pursue somebody like Mark Milley, or maybe enact some of the points that Mark Milley is concerned about?
I do worry some about those rulings because it creates more gray area than it has, but it doesn't eliminate there are still some lines. And even in this one here, again, there is no presidential authority to literally just put someone in jail and say court-martial him and convict him. The system simply doesn't work that way, no matter what use the president may make of like executive powers, for example. So I think our system is a little bit more robust than what people are claiming or what people are afraid of. And that goes back, all the way to the founding of the country when they designed how the government was going to work. Now, it has definitely been eroded. Some of those balances of power have been eroded. So there is some cause for concern, but it's not alarm at this point, I would say.
And finally, Daniel, to what extent are you concerned about Trump's recent comments that are getting a lot of play in terms of the media and online, the enemy from within comments? To what extent does that terminology that he's used a couple times concern you?
Well, I mean, he's been saying that since the 2016 campaign. I mean, he's never said anything else. He calls it sometimes the deep state or they're coming out to get me. And certainly somebody who's had a couple of assassination attempts, you can understand where they might be concerned because we still to this day don't know a lot about the actual motivations or who may else have been involved with that. So that's still an ongoing investigation. But, it just does speak to the times, I think, because a lot of people think, and really for multiple quarters in the U.S., that there's a so-called deep state that is coming after, regular people or that's ruled from above. And, that's in the eye of the beholder, I guess. But it is something that we need to pay attention to.
It is important to note recently more than 200 retired generals and admirals endorsed Donald Trump.